6 billion HTTP requests moving through a single company's systems every single day, a number that dwarfs intuition. The machine talking to itself and to people continuously. At peak, the platform is serving more than 100 million people at once, each session fragmented into dozens of individual calls. Within that traffic, more than 2 million bets can be placed every hour, each one a transaction that must clear, settle, and be recorded. 27 languages, 96 sports, a catalogue of rules, markets, and edge cases broad enough to feel almost encyclopedic, all of it running without interruption since the year 2000. A live service that has never really been turned off. Most people have never examined this company closely. In a meaningful sense, that is how the company prefers it. There is no stock listing, no analyst day, no quarterly earnings call. Very few of the usual signals that invite outside scrutiny. More than 9,000 employees spread across more than a dozen countries operating this invisible machine. By online traffic alone, bet365 would rank among Britain's most discussed technology companies, if it chose to court that conversation. It does not. Stoke-on-Trent, in the English Midlands, a post-industrial landscape, still reckoning with the slow departure of the kilns and factories that had defined it for a century and a half. In that setting, Denise Coates, then 33, decided to move the family's betting business from high street shops onto the internet. Coates understood that the internet would move gambling online faster than most operators recognized, and that the window to build position was closing. She secured a £15 million credit facility, mortgaging the family's landholding to do it. A bet on infrastructure, not advertising. The online platform launched in 2001. The company grew. It kept growing, through booms and busts, without listing or taking outside equity. The company never listed, never ceded control. Ownership and control were not just financial choices. They were operating principles. That founding instinct, to build, to own, to control, is not corporate mythology. It is visible in the company's technology stack 2.5 decades later. Almost everything the platform runs, it built. Very little licensed middleware. Very few off-the-shelf vendor components at the core. Over 25 years, the platform has accumulated features, markets, languages, integrations, layered decision on decision, like streets in an old city. The result is not failure. It is what long-term success looks like from the inside until the map becomes very hard to read. Knowledge spread thinly across teams and years. Documentation aging faster than systems can change.
Into this environment steps Alan Reed, Head of Platform Innovation at bet365, an internal role rarely visible in public.
When Reed does speak publicly, he is precise. He describes the problem in technical terms, not as a branding exercise. In a June 2025 trade interview, Reed put it plainly: the knowledge is distributed. It does not live in one place. Understanding lives across systems, across teams, across time. Some of it is written down. Some of it only exists in people's heads. Crucially, not all of it lives in documentation that someone wrote and kept current. Beyond the manuals, there is undocumented behavior. Picture a stored procedure written by an engineer who left 8 years ago, wired into 3 oddly named tables and 11 other processes. This is not an outlier. It is the everyday texture of a 25-year-old estate that has never stopped running in production.
Reed's public appearances read like those of a working practitioner, someone more interested in the technical problem than the story around it.
In 2025, he gave one substantial interview to Computer Weekly and wrote one technical piece for SD Times. Both circle the same idea. Reed is not interested in what artificial intelligence can do in the abstract, but in what it can do when grounded in local, proprietary context. The difference between an AI that knows about databases and one that knows this database. Platform innovation itself only becomes visible in the public record in 2025 through a cluster of new job descriptions, a newly formed technology department at the forefront of innovation and research inside a 25-year-old company. The team is hiring in Stoke-on-Trent and Manchester in the UK, and in Denver, Colorado, an all-new American headquarters for the company. It is a small team by design, high leverage, and focused on problems that cut across the entire platform estate. How do you change a platform you no longer fully understand? Reed's team is building an approach that uses knowledge graphs, code parsing, runtime data, and natural language to make the estate legible again. The goal is not to replace engineers, but to give them back the ability to see what they are working with before they change it. From SQL Server on-premises to Google Spanner and Kafka in the cloud. From monolithic application patterns toward event-driven microservices, with state spread across distributed systems. In the company's own words, every millisecond counts in a high-throughput environment with thousands of transactions per second. The old world and the new world now exist simultaneously inside the same company, both live, both load-bearing. Migrating safely between those worlds demands a level of system understanding that cannot be improvised under pressure. It has to be built. Platform innovation exists to help rebuild that understanding. And Reed is, for now, the clearest public voice explaining why it matters. The AI work he describes is not principally about consumer chatbots or marketing tools. It is aimed at something more structural. The ambition is to teach a decades-old machine to understand itself well enough that it can be safely changed. No single person at bet365 knows everything the platform does. No single person could. It has outgrown any one mind. In an industry where a single misaligned automated decision can trigger regulatory action across hemispheres, opacity is not just an engineering risk. How do you sign off on changes when you cannot fully see what the system will touch? The company facing this problem is, in its essentials, the same one Denise Coates built: private, controlled, cautious about external narrative. That instinct, build it, own it, protect it, served the company through extraordinary growth. It now meets a different kind of problem: complexity beyond human comprehension. This is complexity that no individual can hold in their head at once. The platform is now larger than any one person's understanding. What platform innovation is attempting is not a restructuring, not a rebrand, not a cosmetic technology refresh. It is something more fundamental. At its core, this is an effort to make the machine legible to the people responsible for it, so it can be governed, migrated, improved. The aim is to avoid the catastrophic uncertainty that comes from changing things you cannot see in a system that never sleeps. Compared to the AI stories that attract headlines, this is a quiet ambition. No launch event, no bold claim about reshaping the industry. In an industry where automated decisions can have global regulatory consequences, that may be exactly the right kind of ambition to have. There is a particular kind of problem that only exists at scale, not the kind you can see from the outside. This problem lives deep inside a system, encoded in years of decisions that nobody fully remembers anymore. This is a story about that problem, and about what happens when a company builds a machine that can finally see it. Bet365 has been running for 25 years, and for 25 years, engineers made decisions, thousands of them. Each decision is encoded somewhere inside the platform. A stored procedure here, a join there. Logic written into the code itself. Think of it like an old building. The load-bearing structure is not in the blueprint. It is in the walls. Those choices were made by people who understood what they were doing at the time, for reasons no longer written down anywhere. You only discover those decisions when something breaks. The scale makes this harder in every direction. Bet365 processes 6 billion HTTP requests a day. At that volume, the gap between what the documentation says and what the system actually does can be very wide. Wide enough to be dangerous. Documentation, if it exists at all, may be incomplete. It may be outdated. In some cases, it may be absent entirely. To migrate a system this complex safely, you need to understand it at the level of what it actually does, not what it was supposed to do, what it does right now under load in production.
This is where Alan Reed and the platform innovation team begin.
How do you make a system this large legible? The obvious first instinct is to point a large language model at the code and ask it to explain things. Modern AI can reason about syntax, identify patterns, generate plausible explanations. The appeal is obvious. The problem is equally obvious once you see it. A general-purpose model, however capable in the abstract, does not know bet365's naming conventions or schema history. It does not know undocumented dependencies or the institutional choices that live between systems rather than inside them. It can read the words. It cannot read the context. And in a system this complex, context is most of the information. The solution Platform Innovation developed draws on a technique gaining serious traction in industrial AI. It is called GraphRag. GraphRag combines graph databases with retrieval-augmented generation. The idea, at its core, is to give the model a map. The difference GraphRag makes is like asking someone who has read every book on a city versus someone who actually lives there. One has knowledge, the other has knowledge plus context. In complex systems, that gap is everything. The way the bet365 system works begins with extraction. Every database object is passed into its underlying structure. Stored procedures, functions, tables, and views are not read as raw text. They are formally passed into components the system can reason about, formal representations of what the code is doing at the level of its logical components. Separated from surface appearance, the system is not guessing at structure. It is reading it directly, the same way a compiler does. The tool used for this extraction is Microsoft ScriptOrm, a structured analysis library designed specifically for SQL Server code. That choice matters. It means the system works from formal structure, not probabilistic interpretation. Precision is the point. From those syntax trees, facts are extracted. This procedure calls that function. This table is read by 12 procedures. This view depends on that join. This parameter passes through 3 layers. These extracted facts become the raw material for something larger. And the graph does not stop at a single database. It is built to capture relationships across many databases simultaneously, across the whole estate. The map shows not just local structure, but connections that cross boundaries, dependencies that span schemas and systems. Some of that coupling was never explicitly designed, but it exists, and it matters. Here is where the bet365 implementation becomes unusual. The graph is not left as a bare structural map. Natural language descriptions are added, translating technical facts into terms that can be reasoned about in plain language. The map learns to speak runtime metrics, execution counts, CPU time, physical reads. These are the actual costs of running each object under real production load. They turn a dependency map into operational intelligence. A stored procedure called 10 times a day is different from one called 40 million times, even if they look identical on the page. With runtime data, the graph knows not just what connects to what, but what matters under stress. It can surface the hot paths. On top of all of this sits an interaction layer. Engineers can ask natural language questions. Which stored procedures read this table? What are the dependencies of this function? What objects would be affected if a schema changed? The system answers. It can enumerate dependencies and likely impacts grounded in the graph and the metrics beneath it. Tasks that once required weeks of careful, manual forensic work can now be completed in hours with improved accuracy and with reduced risk of missing a dependency that matters. That is not a marginal improvement. It is a different way of working. From outside the company, that number cannot be verified. The precise nature of the work and the baseline stay inside bet365. What can be observed is the problem it was applied to, and the problem is real, documented, and large. The data warehouse migration is not a background project. It is a multi-year architectural transformation the company's future operating model depends on. Bet365 is moving from SQL Server on-premises toward Google Spanner and Kafka in the cloud. This is rebuilding the foundation. GraphRag is not a research exercise sitting alongside the migration. It is a migration instrument used to help redesign databases for the new environment. It helps understand what needs to move and how, reducing the risk of changing things whose full effects are not visible. Computing's September 2025 coverage made this explicit. The code modernization use case is tied directly to the platform transformation, AI, in service of consequential engineering work, a three-dimensional rendering of code and dependencies. It is navigable in real time, designed not for a dashboard no one opens, but to be walked through and explored. An engineer who has just joined the team can understand in an hour what might previously have taken months to piece together. The machine draws itself, and the drawing is legible. That phrase deserves to sit with you for a moment. A system complex enough to be almost unknowable has produced its own map, and the map can be read. What Reed does not say publicly is which foundation model underlies the system, or what the internal benchmarks show at scale. Nor does he describe how the architecture would need to change as the graph grows. Those specifics stay inside Bet365. That reticence fits a private company that has spent 25 years building proprietary technology precisely because it is harder to copy. The silence is not evasion. It is strategy. Consider the choice of problem. A new AI team could have worked on customer experience, marketing personalization, fraud detection, or chatbots. Instead, platform innovation chose to work on the company's ability to understand its own code. That is an unusual priority. It signals a company that has looked at its situation honestly and decided the urgent need is to recover visibility over what it already does. A platform this size, running at this speed, cannot be safely changed by people who cannot see it clearly. The AI work is in service of control. Not theatrical governance as brand exercise, but operational control over real changes. Operational control means the ability to make a change and know what you are changing. That distinction matters more than it first appears. In this sense, the system Reed's team has built is an act of institutional self-knowledge. A company of this character, at this size, decided to invest in making its own machine legible to itself. That is where it sees leverage. The knowledge graph continues to grow. The platform migration continues to accelerate. Each makes the other more important. The two are now bound together. The map being drawn and the territory being rebuilt reinforce each other's significance. To understand what happens next at Bet365, you have to watch both simultaneously, the map and the territory. Both are in motion at once. It is not a comfortable place to work, but it may be the only honest way to do it. The problem with legacy code is not that it is old. The problem is that it remembers things nobody else does. Platform innovation built a way to ask the system what it remembers, and for the first time, to get an answer that can be trusted. Every second, somewhere in the world, a sporting event changes state. A ball crosses a line. A player goes down. A match turns. And somewhere in the infrastructure of a global betting platform, a number has to change too. Immediately, correctly, and at scale. This is Act 3. Bet365 is running two AI operations at once, and they could not feel more different. One looks inward, at the machine itself. The other looks outward, at every live match, every play, every moment, and tries to put a price on what happens next. 1,200 miles southwest of Stoke-on-Trent, a city that was not a gambling hub 5 years ago, is now a headquarters. Denver, Colorado, home to Bet365's all-new American base for trading, technology, and market expansion in the Rocky Mountain West. The choice of Denver is deliberate, close enough to the American sports market, far enough from the institutional weight of the British operation. In the logic of US expansion, that distance is an asset. It gives the team room to build differently, faster, with less legacy holding it back. Inside Denver, the quantitative analysis sports team is not drawing dependency maps or building knowledge graphs. They are building something with a completely different relationship to time. Their models have to be right in the next few seconds, because if they are wrong, the cost arrives immediately. There is no buffer, no grace period, only the market's response. In-play betting is the most demanding environment in which probabilistic reasoning operates at scale. The match is live, events happen, and every single event changes the fair price of every subsequent bet. The system must rewrite its view of the future continuously. The model has milliseconds, sometimes fewer, to recalculate before the market moves, before anyone can exploit an old price. On the other side of the screen, a sharp bettor has read the same information. If the model lags, they take the stale price instantly. This is not a theoretical tension between speed and accuracy. It is the central engineering problem of real-time sports markets. The Denver quant roles ask for Python, R, scikit-learn, TensorFlow, PyTorch, not as research credentials, but as production tools. They also ask for model optimization for computational efficiency. An elegant model that runs at the wrong speed is a model that fails. Every millisecond counts. In a demanding, high-throughput environment with thousands of transactions per second. That is the operating condition. This is not an edge case or a stress test. It is the everyday reality in which these systems have to behave correctly. There is a particular kind of stress in building systems where your output is immediately tested by the market, not by colleagues. A language model that gives a bad answer produces something an engineer can notice, discuss, and correct over time. A pricing model that produces bad odds in a live event produces a financial result before anyone can intervene. This is what makes sports pricing the most commercially visible layer of bet365's AI work. A failure in the knowledge graph costs time and frustrates people. A failure in the pricing model costs money, immediately, at scale. In October 2022, Genius Sports announced an extension of its partnership with bet365. The deal is built around second spectrum tracking technology, the same spatial tracking system used by NBA and Premier League clubs. What second spectrum provides is not box scores or conventional match events. It is the live spatial geometry of a game. Computer vision converts that raw spatial data into structured inputs that probabilistic models can consume reliably. The pricing engine stops reasoning from high-level events alone. It reasons from the granular physical state of the game itself. This matters because the physical state often anticipates the event. Pressure, fatigue, and structure all move the probabilities first. A model that reads the spatial signal can move before anything appears in a conventional event feed. It prices the future, not the past. The Genius Sports relationship is also a public acknowledgement. Bet365 is deeply proprietary, but pragmatic about specialists. Second Spectrum's tracking represents years of investment that would be expensive and slow to replicate. The partnership accelerates input quality without owning the entire stack. What bet365 does own and protects is the pricing logic itself, the model architecture, the calibration process, the in-play decision frameworks. It is the same protective instinct Denise Coates applied to the online platform in 2001, now extended to the models themselves. Those models run on an infrastructure in transition. The move from SQL Server on-premises to Google Spanner and Kafka in the cloud is underway. This is not just a data warehouse migration. It touches every system that processes high-frequency transactional data, including sports pricing. Spanner's globally distributed, strongly consistent architecture is designed for workloads with thousands of simultaneous writes and tight latency. The migration is, in that sense, a bet on infrastructure, that the new foundation can carry the speed and volume the markets demand. The migration happens while models on the old infrastructure are still live, still pricing, still moving money every second. There is no quiet period. The map is being redrawn, while the territory is being driven through at full speed. BigQuery for analytics, Vertex AI, pipelines for orchestration, cloud build, and GitLab CI for deployment. Vertex AI, endpoints for serving, model monitoring for drift detection, and A/B testing frameworks for comparing model versions in production. This is not the tooling of a company experimenting with machine learning. It is the tooling of a company operationalizing it. There is a word that connects the knowledge graph, the sports pricing operation, and the ML ops infrastructure: grounding. The knowledge graph works because it is grounded in bet365's specific code, runtime data, and institutional context. General capability is only useful when anchored to something particular. A model trained on everything is only a starting point. A model calibrated to the specific latency constraints of your infrastructure, markets, and sports is the actual product, not the pre-trained base. Denver is not simply a commercial outpost. It is where the frontier of the product meets the technical depth of platform innovation. Several of the clearest platform innovation AI roles sit in Denver, alongside sports data science and verification engineers. That clustering is deliberate. Commercial opportunity is not the only thing waiting in Denver. The American gaming regulatory environment is fragmented by state. Different rules in different states mean different requirements for licensing, verification, and responsible gambling, all on one platform. A pricing model that performs brilliantly in one jurisdiction must operate within the rules of another without losing its speed. Verification systems that satisfy British requirements must meet specific American mandates. The machine must be fast and accountable. Here, the two stories fold together. System comprehension is not just a legacy problem, it is also a future problem. As new cloud-native systems are built and models are deployed, retrained, and replaced, the need to understand what they are doing does not disappear. The system is faster now. Faster systems make faster mistakes. Visibility becomes more urgent as the machine accelerates. There is a clean, research paper version of industrial AI. Bet365's version looks nothing like that. It is a set of overlapping pressures, resolved imperfectly, in real time, by teams that cannot wait for certainty before they act. The machine prices the world in milliseconds. The people around it must understand it, migrate it, extend it, and keep it within bounds. That is the environment in which platform innovation's quiet, inward-looking work acquires its significance. Bet365 is discovering that governance is not separate from capability. It is the condition of it. A company that cannot see what it has built cannot govern what it is building next. Visibility and control are the same problem. In two jurisdictions, within 4 days of each other, in early 2024, regulators made that point in the most concrete terms available. Those notices are where this story goes next. They are how the abstract question of governance becomes specific, public, and unavoidable. What does it cost a company when its controls fail? Sometimes the answer arrives in plain language from regulators. Two regulators on two continents speaking within days of each other. Together, they told a story Bet365 could not ignore. The letters arrived within 4 days of each other, from opposite ends of the world. The timing was not incidental. One carried the authority of Austrac in Australia. The other bore the imprint of the UK Gambling Commission in Britain, March 7, 2024. Austrac, Australia's financial intelligence regulator, announced a formal enforcement investigation into Bet365's Australian entity. This was not a warning letter and not a routine review request. It was a full enforcement investigation, with all the consequences that implies. Austrac is not an agency to underestimate. It has extracted some of the largest financial penalties in Australian corporate history. When Austrac opened its investigation on March 7th, that history traveled with it. Everyone understood what might follow if failures were confirmed. 4 days later, on April 4th, The UK Gambling Commission announced that Bet365 entities would pay a combined total of £582,120. The Commission cited anti-money laundering control failures and social responsibility failures. The language was precise and it was public. 2 regulators, 2 countries, 4 days. The largest online gambling operation in the world by volume was told its internal controls had fallen short. On paper, neither action is an AI story. The documented failures are AML failures and social responsibility failures, rooted in process and oversight. They can arise from human process gaps, insufficient monitoring, or weak escalation design. Failures of attention, structure, and follow-through. Yet, they are not separate from the AI work happening inside Bet365. The connection is structural, not cosmetic. Regulatory pressure is not just the backdrop for technology work. It is the condition that defines what that work must achieve. Every AI system built at Bet365 now has to operate inside that reality, not alongside it or after it. In Denver, something significant is under construction. A new U.S. branch of the Player Account Management Department for verification. The company is not modifying an existing system. It is replacing it entirely, a greenfield rebuild of its verification platform. Choosing greenfield is itself a signal. The existing platform was not considered adequate. Something new had to be built, and built correctly. The new platform runs on Go, React, and Google Cloud Platform, a modern cloud-native stack for a business-critical verification system. At the center is real-time facial recognition, described internally as innovative AI technology, operating at the threshold of access. When a claimed identity needs confirmation, an age check is required, or a risk flag blocks access. A pricing model that is slightly wrong loses money. A verification system that is wrong makes a different kind of error. It can allow someone through who should not be allowed, or block someone who should. Both failures carry real consequences. A false admission can mean a vulnerable person accessing a harmful service. A false rejection can damage trust and invite fresh regulatory scrutiny. Testing a microservice, event-driven platform manually is not enough. The Denver verifications team uses AI to automate testing itself. Here, AI is not only in the verification product, it is also in the process of building that product, shaping how reliability is achieved. Meanwhile, in Stoke-on-Trent, the company's home city, a business systems AI engineer role offers a different view of the same underlying problem. That engineer would build proof-of-concept AI applications using prompt engineering, retrieval-augmented generation, vector indexing, and cloud AI services. Inside that job description, one phrase stands out. Not in a press release, but in a working engineer's posting in Stoke-on-Trent. Responsible AI policy and best practices. A requirement for someone building real systems in a specific regulatory environment. It suggests governance at Bet365 is not being led through public relations, but through the actual work of building systems. Engineers are being asked to define what responsible AI means in practice, as part of their daily function, not as a separate initiative. Agent Ops, a team for designing, deploying, and managing AI-powered workflows and automated agents. Agent Ops is not maintaining existing automations. It is building the infrastructure that will govern how AI agents operate across the business. One of the platforms involved is N8EN, a workflow automation tool connecting processes across operations, finance, and human resources. What distinguishes Agent Ops is not its reach, but that security and governance are designed in from the beginning, not added later. Job descriptions describe explicit structural collaboration with information security. Governance is built into the automation, not bolted on afterward. Across finance, healthcare, and other sectors, AI governance failures that trigger regulators tend to follow the same pattern. Capable teams build powerful systems quickly. Governance follows slowly, or not at all, as deployment outpaces oversight. When regulators arrive, systems often cannot be audited or explain decisions. Remediation costs dwarf what early governance would have required. Bet365 has already paid those costs once in the plain language of UKGC and Austrac announcements. Current hiring and system design suggest an attempt not to pay them again, not through public AI ethics branding, but through architecture and roles.
Alan Reed's public emphasis on grounding AI in specific, local, proprietary context connects directly to this regulatory story.
What it knows, what it is looking at, and what it uses to reach a decision. Opaque general capability is harder to defend to a regulator asking why a specific decision was made on a specific account, on a specific day. At Bet365, explainability and auditability are described as embedded in the AI design philosophy, not added as optional features. This is the operational reality behind that Stoke-on-Trent phrase. The company is not declaring belief in responsible AI, it is hiring to build it. £582,120 and an enforcement investigation. Invisible costs are larger. Every AI system deployed without adequate governance is a potential future version of that cost. Every governed system reduces that risk. Denver's verification platform, Stoke-on-Trent's responsible AI policy, and Agent Ops governance frameworks are three expressions of the same lesson. These are stories about what a company learns when regulators make the cost of lost control concrete and immediate. This is the framework inside which platform innovation must operate. Knowledge graphs, pricing models, and cloud migrations all run within it. The machine cannot think for itself. The people building it have to think for it and think ahead of it. In 2024, Bet365 was reminded, directly and publicly, what happens when that thinking falls short. The regulatory actions of March and April are not a footnote to the AI story at Bet365. They are the condition it must answer to. Pull back far enough, and all of it resolves into a single shape. A knowledge graph, a pricing engine, a verification platform, a governance framework being written before it is needed. These are not separate stories. They are layers of one effort, and that effort has a name. A company that cannot map its own code cannot safely change it. A company that cannot price its own risk in real time cannot compete. A company that cannot verify its own customers cannot satisfy its regulators. And a company that cannot govern its automated workflows cannot defend what they decided. 4 questions, each one a form of self-knowledge. Each one, right now, being answered from scratch. Bet365 is one of the largest online betting platforms on the planet. Its technical infrastructure runs at a scale that most enterprises never approach. And in 2025, it is doing something that has no clean precedent in its own history. It is trying to make a machine that has grown too large and complex to fully knowable again.
The clearest public guide through all of this is Alan Reed.
Not a celebrity technologist, not a visionary in the press release sense, a practitioner's precise understanding of a practical problem. Reed's diagnosis is precise. Large systems accumulate meaning faster than they accumulate documentation. Over time, a gap opens between what a system actually does and what anyone can currently explain about it. That gap, he says, is one of the most expensive problems in enterprise software. The tool Bet365 is directing at that gap is not a chatbot layered over a website. It is a system that reasons from abstract syntax trees. It knows which stored procedures are called 10,000 times a day. It knows which have not run in 3 years. And it can answer a natural language question about dependencies by traversing a knowledge graph built from the company's own operational history. The claim is that this reduces certain kinds of investigation from weeks to hours. That cannot be independently verified from the outside. But the choice of problem tells you something that verification cannot. Step back and the full architecture becomes visible. 5 distinct layers, each doing something the others cannot. Small, cross-site, exploratory, probabilistic models running against live markets, where feedback is instant and the cost of error is immediate. In Denver, the sports pricing teams are running probabilistic models against markets, where the feedback is not quarterly and not weekly. It is instant. The moment a footballer's boot makes contact with a ball, a model is already recalculating. The cost of error is not abstract. It is immediate. On another flank entirely, the verification platform in Denver is greenfield, built from scratch. Its mandate is not just to work, it is to be legally defensible. The question it must answer, with certainty, is a simple one. Who is on the other side of the screen? On a third flank, business systems AI is a quieter deployment. Workshops, tutorial documentation, the steady diffusion of AI capability into the wider organization, and the equally deliberate establishment of responsible practice at the level of individual engineers. And then there is agent ops, building governance frameworks for automated workflows before those workflows go live. In an industry where governance is almost always written after the problems appear, this is a deliberate reversal. Framework first, automation second. Beneath all of it, the infrastructure substrate is still being poured. Google Cloud, Spanner, Kafka, Kubernetes, Terraform, BigQuery. These are not finished systems. They are infrastructure in transition. Running alongside the SQL Server estate they are replacing. The Denver database role currently being recruited describes, in plain language, every millisecond, counting in a demanding, high-throughput environment with thousands of transactions per second. That is describing a system that must run perfectly while its foundations are being changed. That is not a comfortable position. It is the position Bet365 has chosen. None of this exists in a vacuum. In 2024, Bet365 paid £582,120 to the UK Gambling Commission. 4 days later, the Australian Transaction Reports and Analysis Centre opened an enforcement investigation. These were not abstract, reputational events. They were the auditable record of control failures. Every system now being built at Bet365 that touches customer identity, automated decision-making, or workflow governance exists in the context of that record. The responsible AI language appearing in job descriptions in Stoke-on-Trent is not corporate decoration. It is institutional memory with a price tag attached. Reed's position on this is consistent without being preachy. The argument is not that AI must be governed because governance is virtuous. The argument is operational. A system that cannot be interrogated, cannot be defended to a regulator, cannot be corrected when it drifts, cannot be trusted by the engineers responsible for the platform it touches. Explainability is not an ethical add-on. It is an operational requirement. If you cannot ask the system those questions, you cannot correct it. You cannot defend it. And in Bet365's operating environment, that is not a philosophical problem. It is a regulatory one. It is important to say clearly what the public record does not show. No published architecture reveals which foundation models Bet365 is standardizing on. No external audit confirms the efficiency gains claimed for GraphRag. No Enterprise AI Governance Council has been named in any public source. Institutional caution after sanctions. The instinct of a private company that has never felt obligated to explain itself and sees no reason to start now. The evidence does not settle the question. Denise Coates does not appear in the public AI story in any direct way. Her presence is structural rather than personal. She is the reason the company is still private, still controlled, still making decisions on timescales that public competitors cannot afford. In 2001, Family Land was mortgaged for a £15 million credit line. It was not a financial maneuver. It was a statement about who would be making the decisions and on what terms. 25 years later, the same logic still applies. That private ownership creates a real freedom. No quarterly earnings call demanding breakthrough announcements. No public market valuation attached to each model deployment. No investor expectation that every technical initiative be narratable as transformation. But its limits are equally real. A company that controls its own narrative also controls what is visible. And what is not visible cannot be independently assessed. At the core of everything platform innovation is building is a specific bet, not a bet on a technology, not a bet on a timeline. A bet that the hardest and most expensive problems in running a platform at this scale are problems of legibility, of making the system's own behavior visible, interpretable, and therefore manageable. If that bet is correct, then the combination of four capabilities represents something genuinely unusual. GraphRag for code comprehension, MLOps infrastructure for model governance, verification AI for trust management, and AgentOps for controlled automation. Whether it succeeds is not a question the public record can answer. The system is still in progress. The migration is still running. The governance frameworks are still being written. The verification platform is still being built. Platform innovation is still, in its own description, newly formed.
Alan Reed remains the clearest public voice describing what platform innovation is for.
And the limits of what he has been willing or able to say in public are the limits of what can be known from outside. That is not a criticism. It is the geometry of a private company doing consequential work, quietly. That the internet would change gambling forever. She was right, in ways that exceeded almost anyone's prediction. Now the company she built is making another wager, this one about knowledge, about architecture, about what it means for a machine to understand itself. The graph grows, the lines multiply, and somewhere inside the density of all those connections, a small team in Stoke-on-Trent and Denver is trying to draw a map that makes sense of it. What can be said is this. Bet365 is attempting something that has no clean precedent in its own history. Under regulatory scrutiny, inside a platform migration, across multiple jurisdictions, in real time. It is trying to make a machine that has grown too large and complex to fully knowable again. The map is being drawn, and the territory is still changing.